Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to Grief Talk with Audrey. This is your host, Audrey Pellicano, Health and Transitions mentor after loss and CEO of WiseWidow.com. On Grief Talk with Audrey, I bring you experts in the fields of death and dying, grief and loss, hope and healing, and those who have themselves been on their own grief journey to share their experiences and skills to help my listeners. Today, I'd like to welcome Rachel Kodanaz, author of the recently released Living with Loss One Day at a Time. Rachel is an author, speaker, coach, and she's here to share her story of loss and hope with us. Sorry for those technical glitches there, Rachel.
Hi, Audrey. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, I used to panic when there was a technical glitch. Now I just try and go with the flow because that's something you can't control.
Right.
For those of you who have joined us, I'm going to ask Rachel to tell us a little bit about her story before we get into how she came to write the book.
Okay, so my story, I actually, by profession, is information technology and telecommunications with a business background in Fortune 100 companies, much different than a career now in grief and loss. And I came to my grief and loss career by my own personal loss. In 1992, my husband passed away suddenly and left me with a 2-year-old daughter. And at that time, when all that happened, I just kind of found my way through learning so much about myself and learning so much about corporate America, handling grief and loss, that I just sort of took it on.
And you, when your husband died, you had a 2-year-old. Was your daughter 2?
Yes, she was, and now she's all grown up. She's 24, living right near you in New York.
Yes, she is. She is. So it's been a while since you were widowed, as same as for myself. So how did you come to write Living with Loss One Day at a Time?
Well, as you know me, Audrey, I've been very involved with Camp Widow and Soaring Spirits Foundation, as well as National Alliance of Grieving Children and my own community in Denver, a Heartlight Center, and other not-for-profits there. I've done a lot of counseling, facilitated support groups, corporations, in a lot of corporations, with learning just so much about people that are grieving a loss and really how heart-wrenching it is, but also how there's practical ways of we just need to work through this. There's nothing we could do but work through it. So I came up with the notion of I had a book in me, like many of us do, and instead of telling my story, because my story is just a story, just like your story, Audrey, you have a story. We all have stories. What I wanted to do is do something a little bit different, take all this information that I had gathered for 20 years about how other people and what their hardships are around their losses, and put it together as a daily thought or lesson of loss. So 365 lessons and thoughts. And what's interesting is my editors, they went through it. They're like, okay, Rachel, you haven't repeated yourself. And I said, well, that was the plan.
Yeah, yeah. And it's the kind of a book that somebody can open up day 150.
Correct.
And you might take that tip.
There's no beginning, there's no end, there's no January, there's no December. It doesn't matter if you're a month out from your loss or 10 years out from your loss. Each day I provide a little bit of hope, a little bit of what's really going on in your world, how to communicate your wants and needs, how to get out of ruts, treasuring your memories, finding comfort, rediscovering yourself. Every day is something different.
Right. So it's an answer, actually, to a lot of the questions that many people, after the loss of a loved one, have nowhere else to go for the right answer.
Correct. And my intention is to just do it at your time. Not everybody has their own journey, and no two people really grieve the same.
Now, it's over 20 years since you've been widowed. I hate to say what took you so long, but what took you so long? I'm still writing my long book, too. But what was it that you weren't ready? And yes, I agree, we all have a book in us.
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, because I did, my first goal was to start a not-for-profit and help with just, the people locally. of just running and facilitating groups, but not only was I facilitating grief groups for widowhood, I was also doing loss of parent, which were, because my age group that I worked with were, the under 55 widows. So what it did was there was a lot of children involved, and I'm not saying little children, but more so the adult children. So I was supporting them as well. So to really answer your question, why did it take me so long to write it? I was doing a bunch of that and grief in the workplace and so many different things, gathering information. It wasn't until I had an aha moment at one of my sessions to say, if there was a handbook, so to speak, or a book that I could give these people so they can go leave maybe this group when they're ready, but they can keep going, or they can have a tool to discuss with their family members what they're feeling. So it was really more of a combination of listening to the adult children tell me about their challenges, and then the widows telling me, and then, of course, working with every other type of loss. I just said, well, it could be a good communication tool.
Right. And it is. There's no question. There are wonderful tips in there. And I know there are widows who I've worked with, and it's years out, and they come up with questions that have been inside them for so many years, and they've never gotten the answers. I know Carol Brody-Fleet recently just did an article in Huffington Post about widows asking permission. Is it okay to? And I think that your book frees that up. Yeah, it's okay to feel sad, but it's okay to feel happy.
Right. So that 2-year-old daughter that's now 24, she has her age group comment to me is always that there's a social, or pop culture judgment of people that are going through losses, that we assume things. This is just her watching me, doing presentations and stuff. She said, Mom, there's a lot of assumptions of what people think this looks like and how you should and what you should, etc. And so just like what you shared about Carol, is that we question ourselves and we try to express it to people that don't know, have never experienced anything, and they don't know how to answer it, or, like I said, there's some kind of social judgment on it, whether it's a remarriage or whether it's leaving your husband's voice message still on your answering machine, whatever it is that you choose to do, but leaving his shoes by the front door, not selling his car or her car, whatever it is, that there's people around. So this just gives a little bit of insight of it's okay. It's okay. You do your journey when you want to do your journey. And you know what? If people are pushing you, there's even tools in there to say, you know what? Thank you. I'll take that under advisement.
Right. Now, I know you've done a lot of work with grief in the workplace, and I've had quite a few widows, actually, who have gone through their grief journey and experienced, I think, much of what you did within the corporate structure. Could you tell a little bit about what your experience was when your husband died?
Well, it's interesting. It's a very good question, because I think my company that I worked for, and I was in management, and I had 3 offices around the United States, I think my company did the best that they could do under the circumstances, not knowing what to do. So that was kind of a loaded response. Because they did give me appropriate time off, which was great.
Right.
I didn't even know that they gave me what time off. I mean, I had no idea because I was so out of it. So they did give me appropriate time out, and we did work out just different ways of me handling my time off. But what they weren't good at, which I don't know if they could be, that's why I try to go around educating, is they didn't know how to deal with me once I returned. They knew how to deal with the logistics of me being out and the logistics of the bereavement leave and how do I get a paycheck in her bank account, that type of stuff, but not the coworkers, what to expect of me when I returned, what to expect of what my abilities would be when I returned, what the timeline would be for me to get my feet back on the ground, and what else could they do to make the transition better. And so what I do when I go out is try to answer all those questions of how can we get this employee back on track, because at the end of the day, business as usual is how it goes. Right.
Yeah, however, and I don't know that much has changed in the 20 years. I don't know what you've seen over the course of that time. I think there's a little bit more awareness and that may be because baby boomers are more vocal, and we're at that stage where we are experiencing loss. But I think we still have a long way to go in the workplace. What do you think?
I agree. We have a long way to go in the workplace. One of the biggest challenges that I see, because I'm very involved with EAPs, employee assistance programs, and I'm very involved in just conferences around the workplace, that employees are afraid to speak up that they need anything because they're afraid that their job will be the next job that's eliminated, or their job they won't get the next promotion. So what I'm learning is that some of the companies are putting in what they consider to be more of a grief in the workplace or a compassionate workplace type approach to dealing with employees. It's really, some of it's very, I don't want to say shallow, but it is not it's not in depth, because yes, they've added on a bereavement leave situation, they've added aunts and uncles and, just partners and all, living partners and all that. But that's for the first week. But what happens 3 months, 6 months, 9 months down the road? And so I'm not sure they're great at that. I do think, as I started off when you asked me originally, I think there were some things my company did right, and there were some things that they could improve on. And what I think still today they can improve on is allowing this employee to be able to come to work knowing that it's a safe environment, and that it might be 3, 6, 9 months before they're really getting back on their feet. But it costs more, Audrey, to hire a new employee than it does to be patient enough to be with this employee. Right.
Have they begun to really educate the peers? And this is something that I think has been neglected in the workplace, that and they say for every death, 10 people are impacted. And that's even personal loss, and there's grief, friends grief. People don't really pay much attention to, your best friend died. Well, the focus is on the family, of course, rightfully so. However, the friends grieve deeply. So the peers at work want to feel supportive of their friend, their peer who's returning to the workplace, but they're not educated, or are they now, as to how to best provide that kind of support in the day-to-day.
Well, Friends creates a whole different arena of because first of all, a lot of us live in a mobile society, so the people that we're working with are not our family. The area that we live are not friends, not our family. I had moved for corporate America. I'd been in this town that when my husband passed away 10 months. So the people that were supporting me were my friends, not my family. So not only did they, they don't get any benefits, so they don't get time off to help me. So that's one whole big piece. But the piece in the workplace, which I really think you're asking, is that, now we're peers and we spend 60, 80 hours with each other, and then we're texting with them when we go home, yet how do they handle the situation? That was a tough one, but for me, one of the biggest ones that I saw, and now that I spent time in there, is that you are friends. Even if you're coworkers, you have a friendship component to it. And then now they saw, okay, Rachel, their strong manager, isn't strong anymore. So now they start wondering what's going to happen to them, because am I not going to take care of them the way they should be? And then the second piece is, where is across the line of friendship versus I'm their manager? It creates a whole avenue of what to do next. And at the end of the day, when people say to me, when I'm presenting, well, then how do you handle that? Well, our human intuition is usually pretty spot on, and we are humans before we're employees and everything else. And I think we need to take care of each other. How detailed you go into the situation is based on what your relationship is, that person. But you still can provide support in so many different ways.
Yeah. Now, EAP serves a purpose. When I was in corporate America, EAP, honestly, was viewed as a place to go if you had substance abuse issues. I don't know that a lot has changed, which is unfortunate. Do corporations really tap into the resource within the EAP?
Well, that's another interesting question. So I just came back from Virginia, where I did a great deal of work with big EAPs there. And what I found was I believe it's back when I went through it. I was a manager, and I didn't even think about calling my EAP, which is shame on Rachel, right? Because I didn't even think about it, because I, like you, always thought of it to be a substance abuse. You get support. Well, working with them now, the majority of them tell you that we have a grief and loss program, but they will also tell you that it's limited. And most of the time, what it is they provide they might provide a resource, or they can, the ability based on the contract that the company has with the EAP, they can provide 1 to 3 sessions with a counselor that's paid for. The challenge of what I say to some of the EAP, and of course there's internal and external EAPs. The challenge is that usually an EAP covers, let's say, 200 companies. Each company has their own leave policy, not just bereavement leave, but just, personal time off or the Family Leave Act. They all look at those differently. So the EAP cannot provide all the information that one would think, what we would think of an EAP could provide. It's just still the cards are still too close to the company.
Yeah, I think that, the one word you used, and I use it frequently too, because I think it's the basis for where we have to go within grief, whether it's in the corporate arena or it's society in general, and it's all about education.
It's all about education, but even like with living with loss one day at a time, people say to me, so what is it that you are most surprised about? And one of them is, it's like how that's a tool for families to talk. So it's a form of education, is where if they just, because they sit at the dinner table and do you miss Dad? Well, yeah, what do you say? So instead of asking the obvious questions that you already know the answers to, there's like certain days, like there's one day that I've been telling the stories that says, play hooky and go to a movie. It creates a dinner time conversation. Okay, if Grandpa was alive, which movie would he want to go to? Again, it's just really education around and knowing what to expect when you're going through this loss and being able to communicate and talk.
Yeah, it is communication, and because we live, I think, as much as we're communicating, via every, modality out there, I think we're not communicating very much at all.
Well, I
we have a lot
to
learn.
I know. I could tell you because my current husband, because I've been remarried, says to me that they forgot to cut the umbilical cord between me and my daughter because we talk so much. But so here we are, we're in sync. But she could text me something, and I have no clue what she's talking about, but I've already talked to her twice in one day. So can you imagine that if you are grieving or even anything and you get a text message or an email from someone, we as the reader or the receiver of them are going to read into it in ways that are not what the message is.
Yes, well, that's
so you're
the problem
right.
with email.
So this whole grief and loss, assumptions happen, dysfunctionality occurs because we're not talking, we're not learning, we don't know what to expect from one another.
Right, right. I don't know how, and I don't know what experience you've had, but about bringing the subject of loss, doesn't have to use the word grief, but just the subject of loss because it's something we have from childhood into school.
Yeah. So I have,
kids blues.
Yes. The hard part about school is, of course, parents have different opinions of what kids should or shouldn't talk about, which, it's a hard thing. But on the other hand, these, just what happened in Connecticut, and these kids are smart enough to see what the news is, and they have their electronic devices in their hand capturing everything happening that's in the world. So we can't shelter them from it. We can't. And I do believe that we're going to be, I've shared this many times in presentations, with the support of some large foundations like Susan G. Komen and Livestrong, we have accepted as a community what it's like to be out there suffering a terminal illness and getting a treatment and losing our hair and all that. 15 years ago you put a wig on, a hat on or something because you didn't want people to know. Now you walk out proudly that, I am suffering this, but I am going to be okay. And I think we're going to get there in grief and loss. I think we have a while to go. But just people like you, Audrey, that provide these opportunities for people to call in and to listen and to whether they're driving their car or they're sitting at their desk or they're, cooking dinner and listening to it, whatever it is that they're doing, is it gives them more education, more hope, more understanding of people and what they're going through, and we shouldn't judge each other because, I was just yesterday, I was doing a book event, and somebody said to me, yeah, I'm trying to tell my friend, they just can't get over this. I'm like, I looked at her and I said, what is there to get over? There's nothing to get over here. This is a lifetime change.
Right.
It's not getting over it, it's incorporating it into your current life. And you're expecting her to just be over it? What is it? Like, is there a timeline here? Is there a button to push?
Right. I hear things like dealing. I'm trying to deal with it. No, you don't deal with it. Oh, you're getting over it. And it's, the terminology, the vocabulary that we use related to grief, as you said, your life is forever changed. You do incorporate and move forward, but you never leave the loss. The loss always exists.
It always exists. Yes, it does.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if you, of course, there are 365 of them, but if you were asked what were, say, 3 of your favorites from your book, what would you choose?
You do ask some hard questions. Okay, so being an athlete, I think anything that has a notion of something that's athletic, I think, because that to me is my milestones or my reaches or my goals, right? Mm-hmm. So I have one that is, the treadmill. I fell off the treadmill, but the life still continued, although I fell off. And I like that metaphor that I put in that one where, yes, you did fall off the treadmill and life did keep going, but you have a few bumps and bruises, and here's some ideas of how to get back on that treadmill of life and keep moving. So it has some analogy there, but I like it because you really do fall off the belt, but you still are with us. There's another one that I have is that, reaching to the top of the mountain, and whatever your mountain is, whatever it is that you find that you're having trouble getting over when you're going through your loss, and when you get there, reach over and pull over the next person or help the next person, because it's a mountain we got to keep climbing it, just like you and I, right? We both had our own situations, but we're going to climb that mountain together, and we're going to keep going. And then my other one that I share a lot is because I chose day 14 on that one is because my husband passed away on April 14th, is that just sit on the couch, get a soothing cup of tea. That's what the day 14 is, have a soothing cup of tea. Just, get either a trashy magazine, a good novel, don't read anything, but just sit there, have a soothing cup of tea, let the amino acids that are in tea relax you, feel good about yourself, and just feel good about just sitting and breathing. So every day, there's some days that I'm not so nice, where I say, where have all my friends gone and why? And a little bit harsher ones. But my 3, because you asked for 3, I would say the encouraging ones are the ones that I like the best, or the relaxing ones.
Okay. Now, I know you are signing books all over the place. Where are your next events, and how can people find out about your next events?
So I do a newsletter, and, of course, if you got on my website, RachelKodanaz.com, we can get the and I'll spell all that in a minute, the newsletter, and that shares some of it. But on my website, there are always the calendar of events, and I have some of them are open to the public, some of them aren't, but some of them are actually, if there was something, like I'll be a widow in San Diego, and if you know of a widow, it's a great weekend for people that are suffering that type of a loss. That's in July. In June, I'll be at National Alliance of Grieving Children, and I'll be speaking actually on grief in the workplace there, which I'm thrilled about. So because it's a good group to be speaking grief in the workplace. So it really depends on. Sometimes I'm in Denver. Sometimes it really depends on the week and the month and the radio show or whatever. But the best place to reach me is at through my website, which is Rachel Kodanaz. So it's RachelKodanaz.com, and you can email me at Rachel@RachelKodanaz.com. The book is available on any online, whether it's Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any of the online stores, and most local. I don't, some of your listeners are going to be in maybe some more remote areas, and you probably have to order it online, but it is available everywhere.
Is it available like in Kindle or Nook?
Yes, it is, both, and the iBook, all of those. The advantage of getting it on my website versus an Amazon is I sign them, but I know for many people, if it's important, if it's a gift, I'm more than happy to do that. But, just whatever, it has become such a gift. Like, you have your ahas, what didn't you expect? And I didn't expect as much gifting that's going on.
Oh, nice. Yeah, because when you wrote the book, and which is what I did not know when I had first heard that your book was coming out, was that it wasn't geared just to widows. It's geared to anyone who suffered the loss of a loved one.
It is geared to that. Yeah, it's not to widows. There's about losing your parents. There's about losing, some of the days are about, if someone lost a child. I chose not to write a widow book because I felt like there's so many other people out there. Not everybody, we all have lost. We're all going to, if we haven't lost our parents yet, we will lose our parents. So there's all types of losses.
Yes, yes. So we're speaking with, I always have a hard time with your name. That's awful. Rachel Kodanaz.
Yes. Very good.
And
Very good.
You can find out more about Rachel, where she'll be speaking. Order her book. Give it as a gift at Rachel. Thanks so much for taking the time to be on the show today. Thank you for writing that wonderful book, which is a treasure to anyone who has experienced the loss of a loved one.
Well, thank you for having me on. Thank you to the listeners for listening. And as Audrey said, you know how to get a hold of me.